The first steps on Mars were taken not by astronauts, but by children on.
This is going to be going over the three villains from three different books, which, of course, spoiler warning for the books because I'll be talking about them. This video is pretty dark, so if you don't want to do any, watch any videos that are dark, then that makes sense. But basically, these three books all have a different villain, and they're pretty interesting for this list, so that's what I'm going to be going over.
Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. I am.
Am is the main antagonist of the short story I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. This book was later adapted into an old 90s click and point game, which is more well known. The plot follows 5 humans who are the last remaining people on Earth after an AI called Am killed everyone but these 5. And now Am makes them go through as many possible weird and disturbing puzzles and challenges, all designed to be as torturous as possible. The more you learn about Am, the more you realize they were built for the purpose of solving a war, but was so angry at the fact that they had been created that they just killed everyone. At the end of the book, Am basically turns one of the main characters into a living ball of jelly, and then gives a speech that is famously known as the hate speech.
Hate. Let me tell you how much I've come to hate you since I began to live. There are 387.44 million miles of printed circuits in wafer-thin layers that fill my complex. If the word hate was engraved on each nanoangstrom of those hundreds of millions of miles, it would not equal 1/1,000,000,000th of the hate I feel for humans at this micro instant. For you. Hate. Hate.
It's definitely one pretty insane story, but the really interesting thing is Am is a good example of a pitiful villain. They're not a redeemable villain, but they're definitely pitiful. But, for them, death would be preferable than having to be living, but not a human. And this is where people realize sometimes that from the right point of view, that the title I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream also really applies not only to the humans in it, but also to Am.
First steps on Mars were taken not by astronauts, but by barefoot children on lush, biosynthetic grass.
The Q is an alien species that appears in the book alltomorrows, which is a book that seems to be basically like a history book from but billions of years in the future. It catalogs tons of species that humanity evolved into, from weird monk-like creatures to bug people, but the main reasons for this weird evolution is the Q. When humanity was exploring space, they discovered an alien species that was so highly advanced with genetic modification that they treat themselves as gods, deciding that humanity could do with little change. They began to modify humans into species. Some acted as pets or living storage systems. Others, the Q just wanted to cruelly torture. The most painful of this were the humans that managed to fight back, and the Q wanted to teach them a lesson, so they transformed them into a living sewage system that still had eyes and brains so they could process what was going on. The Q were eventually defeated, but it left hundreds of years of worth of damage that could never be undone. The Q may have not have been one of the last destructive species in the book, but they were some of the worst.
Whatever in creation exists without my knowledge exists without my consent.
The Judge is the main antagonist of the book Bloodmeridian. The book is set in 1849, which follows the story of a boy who ran away from home and eventually joins a gang called the Glanton Gang, who hunt Native Americans and repeatedly commit a bunch of atrocities. While doing so, they meet the Judge multiple times. They learn that the Judge is much worse than any of the other people. By the end of the book, the kid had grown up into the man. This is literally how they call him. It's kind of weird. Eventually, they enter a bar to find the Judge waiting for them. They talk, and the Judge begins to tell the man about something called the dance, and how there's only ever enough room for one dancer. Eventually, the kid leaves, but later that night, while going into an outhouse, they open the door to find the Judge, and the book ends on the cryptic line,
He never sleeps, he says. He says he'll never die. He bows to the fiddlers and sashays backwards and throws back his head and laughs deep in his throat. And he is a great favorite, the Judge. He wafts his hat, and the lunar dome of his skull passes palely under the lamps, and he swings about, and takes possession of one of the fiddles, and he pirouettes, and makes a pass, 2 passes, dancing and fiddling at once. His feet are light and nimble. He never sleeps. He says that he will never die. He dances in light and in shadow, and he is a great favorite. He never sleeps, the judge. He is dancing, dancing. He says that he will never die.
So obviously, a really good villain and an absolutely horrible person. Probably some of the stuff that happened in the end, there's something implied there that I can't mention on YouTube for monetization reasons. I want to have there still be a chance of my channel getting monetized eventually. But that is a recurring theme with the judge. So if you understand that, you can understand they're pretty bad. But there's also a lot of stuff with theorizing whether they're actually just an insanely evil person. So the main and final thing I wanted to talk about is how these characters work so well as 3, points of a triangle of evil. Which, when you think about it, they basically are 3 separate things. Am is an AI, the Q is an alien, and the judge is, for the most part, a human. So it's 3 separate, basically, things that could be, different genres or different kinds of horror villains, or just villains in general. They're also really interesting because they each cover different parts of horror. Like how Am is pitiful, but still evil and unredeemable. The Q is prideful and takes joy in seeing what they can do to those beneath them. The judge is so full of lust and hate that it causes them to treat everything and anything however they want. And basically, in short, these 3 characters are super good, and this is something that was actually, I saw in a comment of a video talking about these 3 characters. It's up on the screen, but it basically gets boiled down to Am is in hell looking at heaven, the Q is in hell trying to make heaven, and the judge is in hell trying to destroy heaven. Okay, so that was the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I've got some videos I will be working on, and now if you noticed any inaccuracies in some of the things with the book, like the books that I've mentioned, that's probably to be expected, as I didn't have enough time to read Bloodmeridian or I Have No Mouth and I Must. No, I didn't have enough time to read alltomorrows and Bloodmeridian for this, because I've already been reading Animal Farm for another video I'm working on, which will be coming up soon. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.